The day my family celebrated my leaving, my mother ordered champagne. My sister actually raised a glass to finally having our house back. Everyone laughed. I stood in the doorway with 2 suitcases, a cardboard box, and $23 in my checking account. My father didn't even look up from his steak. "You'll figure life out eventually, Megan." I nodded. "I hope I do." Nobody noticed that I left my house key on the table. Nobody asked where I was going. Nobody offered to help. My younger sister, Ashley, was already planning how to turn my bedroom into a home office. "You can take the old couch," Mom called after me. I didn't answer. For 11 years, I had paid bills in that house. Not because anyone forced me. Because Dad's business struggled, Mom stopped working, and Ashley kept having one emergency after another. I paid the electric bill, the mortgage, their car insurance, Ashley's college loans, Mom's medical premiums, even the credit card they used for vacations. Whenever I complained, Mom would say the same thing. "We're family. You don't keep score with family." So I stopped keeping score. Until the day they told me I was the burden. That night, I rented a tiny apartment across town. The next morning, I opened a new bank account and changed every automatic payment connected to my family. I didn't call them. I didn't send an angry message. I simply stopped. 3 days later, my mother called. I let it ring. Then my sister. Then my father. By Friday, there were 17 missed calls. I ignored everyone. The following Monday morning, I was sitting at my new job when my phone buzzed with a voicemail. My mother's voice was trembling. "Megan, something's wrong with the electricity." I deleted it. An hour later, another message arrived. The mortgage company called. I stared at the screen. Then another. Why did the insurance stop? I almost felt guilty. Almost. Then my phone rang again. This time, it was my father's number. I answered. He didn't yell. He didn't insult me. He simply asked one question. "What did you do?" I looked at the spreadsheet I'd finally created. 4 to 7 unpaid bills were listed beneath my family's name. I took a breath. "Nothing, Dad. I just stopped paying for a life you told me I wasn't part of." By Tuesday morning, the family had stopped laughing. My mother called 14 times before breakfast. I answered the 15th. "What happened to the electric bill?" she demanded. "I don't know." "You always pay it." "I used to." There was a long silence. Then she lowered her voice. "Megan, this isn't funny." "I agree." She hung up. 10 minutes later, Ashley called. Her voice was different. "You canceled my car insurance." "I canceled every automatic payment coming out of my account." "But that's my car." "I know. You can't just do this." I stayed at the wall. "You told me I wasn't family anymore." Ashley went quiet. Then she said something I hadn't expected. "You're being dramatic." That sentence almost made me laugh. For 11 years, I had been fixing problems nobody else wanted to admit existed. When Dad's restaurant needed new equipment, I covered the loan. When Mom's roof started leaking, I paid the contractor. When Ashley got behind on tuition, I made the payments. I had never told them how much. I didn't need praise. I needed basic respect. Apparently, even that was too expensive. That afternoon, I received an email from the mortgage company. The payment was overdue. I hadn't realized the mortgage had been coming from my personal account for almost 6 years. I opened the old statements. $1,842 every month. 71 payments. More than $130,000. I stared at the total. Then I noticed something strange. The house wasn't listed under Dad's name. It was jointly owned by Dad, Mom, and me. I read the document again. My name wasn't just on the mortgage. It was on the deed. I immediately called the county records office. The clerk confirmed it. "You own 1/3 of the property." I sat back. My family had spent years telling me I was lucky they let me live there. But legally, I wasn't their dependent. I was their co-owner. And suddenly, the 4 to 7 unpaid bills weren't the biggest problem. The biggest problem was that my family had been using my name, my credit, and my money to maintain a house they believed belonged entirely to them. That evening, Dad called again. This time, he sounded angry. "You're coming home tonight." "No, you don't understand what you've done." I looked at the deed on my desk. I think I'm finally starting to. Dad's words stayed in my head all night. "You don't understand what you've done." Maybe he was right. I didn't understand everything. Not yet. The next morning, I contacted a real estate attorney. I brought the deed, mortgage statements, bank records, and every payment I'd made for the house. He spent nearly an hour going through them. Then he looked up. "Megan, why have you been paying this mortgage?" "Because my parents said they couldn't afford it." He tapped the deed. "You've been paying for an asset you legally own." I frowned. "So they can't throw me out?" "No." He paused. "But there's something else." He showed me a second document. A home equity loan. My name was listed as a co-borrower. I didn't remember signing it. "How much?" $85,000. My stomach dropped. That wasn't for the house. "No." He turned the page. The loan proceeds had gone directly into an account belonging to my father. I called Dad immediately. He answered on the second ring. "What now?" "Did you take out an $85,000 home equity loan using my name?" Silence. Then he said, "It was necessary." "For what?" "We needed to keep the restaurant open." I closed my eyes. The restaurant. The same restaurant where Dad had spent years telling me I was a financial burden. "Did you forge my signature?" Another silence. Then, "You benefited from that business too." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had never owned a share of the restaurant. I had never received a salary from it. But I had paid its electricity, insurance, equipment loans, and tax bills whenever Dad said the business was struggling. My attorney took the phone from my hand. "Mr. Carter, this is attorney Rachel Mills. Please don't discuss this matter with your daughter directly. All future communication should go through my office." Dad immediately became furious. "You hired a lawyer." I looked at the attorney. "Yes." Dad's voice turned cold. "You're really going to do this to your own family?" I answered quietly, "No." I looked at the stack of unpaid bills. "You did this to yourselves." Then my attorney noticed something in the bank records. She pointed to a recurring payment. "What's this $3,200 charge?" I looked closer. It had been withdrawn every month for almost 3 years. The description was simple. Ashley Carter, personal expenses. I stayed at the total. More than $115,000. And suddenly, I realized my sister hadn't just been living in my house. She had been living on my money. I asked my attorney to investigate the $3,200 payments. By the end of the afternoon, she had found 26 more transactions. They weren't all Ashley's. Some went to restaurants. Some went to luxury stores. One payment was for a Caribbean resort. Another was for a jewelry store. I recognized the dates. My parents had celebrated their 30th anniversary that month. They had told me they couldn't afford dinner. Apparently, they couldn't afford to tell me the truth either. Then Rachel found something much worse. "Megan, look at this." She placed a credit card application on the desk. My name was listed as the primary applicant. I had never opened that card. The balance was $41,700. I felt my chest tighten. Who authorized this? Rachel pointed to the signature. It wasn't mine, but underneath it was my father's name as an authorized user. I sat completely still. For years, I had believed my family was simply irresponsible with money. Now I understood. They weren't irresponsible. They were deliberately using me. I called my bank and froze every account connected to me. Then Rachel contacted the credit card company. Within 2 hours, their fraud department opened an investigation. That evening, Dad showed up outside my apartment. He pounded on the door. "Megan, open this door." I didn't move. You're destroying your mother's life. I stayed silent. Then Ashley's voice joined his. You think you're better than us now? I almost opened the door. Not because I wanted to argue, because I wanted to see their faces. But Rachel stopped me. Don't. So I listened. A few seconds later, Dad shouted through the door. You owe this family. I finally spoke. I've paid what I owed. There was silence. Then I heard Ashley say something quietly. Dad answered. I told you she wouldn't cooperate. My blood went cold. They weren't arguing about me. They were discussing me like I was a financial problem they needed to solve. Rachel looked at me. Record this. I turned on my phone. Dad's voice came through the door. We'll use the house. Ashley asked, How? He replied, She owns part of it. If we force a sale, we'll get our money back. I stayed at Rachel. She whispered one sentence. They are planning to sell your house without you. And for the first time, I realized the 4 to 7 unpaid bills weren't revenge. They were evidence. Rachel filed an emergency notice with the county before my family could make a move. By noon, the house was legally flagged for a dispute. My father couldn't sell it, he couldn't refinance it, and he couldn't remove me from the deed. But I still didn't understand why they were so desperate. Then Rachel called me into her office. We found the original loan application. She placed it in front of me. The signature was mine, or something close enough to fool a bank. But the date made my stomach drop. I had been out of state that week. I had proof. Rachel continued. Your father didn't just use your name. He submitted copies of your driver's license and tax documents. I stayed at the papers. How did he get those? You gave them to him. I remembered. Every year, Dad asked me for copies of my tax returns. He said his accountant needed them because we were family. I suddenly felt stupid. Not because I trusted my father, because I never imagined I would need to protect myself from him. Then Rachel found something else. A folder labeled Family Support Agreement. Inside was a document my mother had signed 3 years earlier. It stated that I had supposedly agreed to cover household expenses indefinitely. My signature was at the bottom. It looked almost perfect. Almost. Rachel smiled. They made one mistake. What? The signature was copied from your old mortgage documents. She placed both signatures side by side. The same tiny flaw appeared in exactly the same place. I felt something inside me shift. This wasn't a family misunderstanding anymore. It was fraud. That evening, I received a message from Ashley. Mom is sick because of you. I didn't answer. Another message came. If you don't come home, she'll blame you forever. Then a photograph arrived. My mother was sitting on the kitchen floor, crying. For a moment, guilt hit me. Then I noticed the background. The refrigerator was covered with overdue notices. Electricity, mortgage, insurance, property tax. There were 4 to 7 bills. The same 4 to 7 bills I had stopped paying. I realized what they wanted. They weren't asking me to come home because they missed me. They needed me to restore the money. I typed one response. Mom deserves better than being used as a weapon. Then I blocked Ashley. Rachel looked at me. You're ready? I nodded. For what? She pushed another document across the desk. Tomorrow morning, we're going to court. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. My father arrived with 2 attorneys. My mother came behind him, looking exhausted. Ashley wouldn't look at me. For a moment, I wanted to walk over and hug my mother. Then I remembered the photograph she had sent me. The tears, the overdue bills, the guilt, and the years I'd spent rescuing people who never once asked whether I could afford to rescue them. Rachel stood beside me. The judge reviewed the documents silently. Then he looked at my father. Mr. Carter, did you authorize these loans? Dad's attorney answered before he could. My client disputes the allegations. Rachel stood. We have bank records, forged signatures, account transfers, and documentation showing that the defendant used his daughter's identity to secure credit. My father's face tightened. Then Rachel placed the 4 to 7 unpaid bills on the evidence table. This is the financial pattern. She pointed to each category: mortgage, utilities, insurance, taxes, car payments, credit cards, medical expenses, business loans. Every one of these payments was made from Ms. Carter's personal accounts. The judge looked at my father. Is that true? He finally answered. She was helping the family. Rachel replied calmly. Helping is voluntary. Forgery is not. The courtroom went silent. Then the judge asked for the original family support agreement. Rachel handed it over. He studied the signature. Has this been authenticated? Yes. Rachel placed the forensic report beside it. The signature was digitally reproduced from an older document. My mother covered her mouth. Ashley finally looked at Dad. You said she signed it. Dad didn't answer. That was the moment something broke between them. The judge ordered the house protected from any sale or refinancing until ownership and fraud claims were resolved. Then he turned to my father, and I am referring the alleged identity fraud to the appropriate authorities. Dad's face went pale. Outside the courtroom, he followed me. Megan, please. I stopped. He looked nothing like the man who had told me I was a burden. You're my daughter. I looked at him. I know. He swallowed. But family doesn't abandon family. I held his gaze. No. I took a breath. Family doesn't bankrupt family either. Then I walked away. Behind me, I heard Ashley crying, but I didn't turn around. 3 weeks later, the investigation uncovered something I never expected. My father hadn't acted alone. Rachel called me into her office and closed the door. Megan, we found where the money went. I already knew about Ashley's spending. I knew about the restaurant. I knew about the fake credit cards. But this was different. Rachel opened a spreadsheet. Your father transferred more than $180,000 from accounts connected to your name. Where? She pointed to several payments. A private investment account, a luxury apartment, and finally, a business registered under Ashley's name. I stayed at it. Ashley knew. Rachel nodded. She was a director of the company. My throat tightened. For years, Ashley had called me selfish whenever I questioned her spending. She had cried when I refused to pay for a vacation. She had told our parents I didn't care about the family. And all that time, she knew exactly where the money was going. Rachel wasn't finished. There's one more thing. She opened an email. It had been sent from Ashley's account 6 months earlier. The subject line read, "When Megan finally leaves." My hand started shaking. The email was addressed to my father. I read it slowly. Ashley had written that once I moved out, they should stop pretending to need me emotionally and pressure me financially instead. She even suggested telling me the house would be lost if I didn't keep paying. Then came the sentence that made me stop breathing. She'll feel guilty enough to come back. She always does. I looked away. For the first time, I understood why leaving had felt so difficult. They had trained me to confuse guilt with love. Rachel closed the laptop. You don't have to go back. I know. No, I mean it. You don't owe them another dollar. I nodded. Then my phone rang. It was my mother. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. She was crying. Megan, your father has been arrested. I closed my eyes. What happened? He says you caused this. I felt something inside me go still. Then Mom whispered. Ashley disappeared. I stood. Where did she go? I don't know. A second later, another notification appeared. A message from Ashley. You wanted your freedom. Now come find out what it costs. I didn't chase Ashley. For the first time in my life, I refused to let my family's emergency become my responsibility. Instead, I gave the message to Rachel. She immediately contacted the police. 2 days later, Ashley was found at a hotel 3 states away. She had taken money from the business account and planned to leave the country, but she hadn't expected investigators to already have access to her financial records. When they brought her back, she finally admitted everything. She had helped Dad create the fake agreement. She knew about the credit cards. She knew about the home equity loan. And she knew exactly how much money I had been paying every month. Her excuse was simple. You always had more than us. I looked at her across the interview room. No, Ashley. She stared at me. I just worked for what I had. That was the difference between us. My father's criminal case continued. The court ordered repayment for the fraudulent accounts, and the house remained protected while the ownership dispute was resolved. Eventually, I sold my share of the property. I didn't keep the money. I put it into a separate account for my future. For the first time, I had savings nobody could touch. Mom moved into a small apartment. She called me once. I miss you. I believed her, but I also understood something important. Missing someone doesn't mean you have to return to the life that destroyed you. I forgave my mother eventually. I didn't reconcile with Dad, and Ashley became a stranger. Months later, I drove past the old house. The lights were off. The yard was overgrown. I remembered the night they celebrated my leaving. The champagne, my sister's toast, my father's steak. They had laughed because they thought I was walking away empty-handed. They never realized I had already stopped carrying them. I stopped at the corner and looked at the house one last time. Then I smiled. Not because they had lost everything. Because I finally understood that their unpaid bills had never been my punishment. They were my proof. Proof that I had spent years paying for people who had mistaken my love for an obligation. 4 to 7 bills arrived at their door. But the real debt had been building for 11 years. And when I finally stopped paying it, I didn't destroy my family. I discovered which parts of it had already destroyed themselves.